now. I have someone named AA. Who's that? It's hard to do take roll if I don't have your full name.
Sorry, it's Akasha. I'll change it now.
Pardon me? Ah. Awesome. Well, a few more, probably. Give them a minute. It's been a while, huh?
Yeah. Hi, Professor. How was your dad?
It's good to see your faces, though. Anyone have any questions for me?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, now I can.
Yeah, I just want to ask, like, are your dad okay? Like, is he okay now? Your dad?
Am I what?
Your father? Your father.
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, they he had water around his heart. So
Oh.
they gave him some kind of medication that makes him pee a lot. So to get rid of it, I guess. And they're just watching him, but he should be okay. But thanks for asking.
I hope he feels better, Professor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents are getting older, so it's rough. Okay. All right. It looks like some people wanted to take 2 weeks off instead of just one.
Professor, could I actually ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I was just wondering, I know this is draft 1 due on Sunday. How complete are you looking for that to be? Because I know my partner and I, our experiment's not like fully done. So I was just wondering like how complete you want that.
So you're not supposed to have the experiment done.
Oh, okay.
No, none of you. If you report on a final research project that's already been done, you've done it wrong.
Okay, so what should be in the proposal of draft 1?
Okay, good question. So this is a research proposal. You notice the name proposal.
Right.
That means that you're proposing research that you want to do.
Okay, so it's kind of like what we submitted to you, but like in a more formal format, essentially.
It's let me just do the review slide. It'll make it
Okay,
easier.
sorry about this.
Okay, let me open it. I don't know. Yeah, I should probably just do the review slide for you guys.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I got a lot of people coming in. I guess we have some stragglers. Okay. Let's see, where did I put that at? Okay. Note around here somewhere.
I think it's in week 6 under lectures.
I was trying to find it on my side, but okay, that'll work. Here we go. Thank you. Let's see, anyone else? All right, we're almost full now, so I'll go ahead and start. So, like I was saying, the word should sort of suggest what it is. It's a research proposal. I see your message, Sabrina. Okay. And that means you are going to describe the research that you want to do in the future. You're proposing it. And there are some definite differences between a proposal and a final research paper. So let's go through that. So as far as the APA formatting, you know, like the margins and the font and everything, that's pretty much the same. And make sure that, here's something that some of you missed, and you may have missed that lecture. So I wanted to show you something. As far as when it says do double spacing, there's some things that Microsoft Word does that throws off the spacing. And so to stop it from doing that, you should go to paragraph on the home tab, and this little box here in the corner, click on it. Make sure you have it set like this. And I think I have this in another, on the toolbox page where it says APA format guidelines or something, quick guide. This is there too, just in case you forget. But to keep it from adding any extra space, so because a lot of times Microsoft Word will put just a tad bit more space after a double space, and I can always tell it's there. If you put a check mark in this box, it'll stop it from doing that. So what you do is highlight everything in your paper like I just did here and go to this paragraph page. Make sure it's set to double. There's no spacing before and after, and this box is checked. And that will stop, that will make everything double spaced and you don't have to worry about it. Another thing that you guys, I noticed you did, some of you did, and this is common because it's another thing that Microsoft Word does, but say you have your methods title and you hit center, right? Well, sometimes this is not centered because it will put the tab in place. Like if I have tabs set and then I try to hit this, this will actually have a tab. It'll be just about there instead of true center. And you can always tell the tab is set because this top little dealy here will be like this, and then it'll stay centered. It says up here when you look on the home tab that it's set to center. See, it says it's set to center, but if you look here on the ruler, there's an extra tab, so it's not quite centered. So if you move this back, you'll get it to the correct center. All right, so there's that. Just trying to remember everything that I notice when I'm looking at your papers. Okay, so let's see, title page. Title page remains the same. The abstract pretty much remains the same. In a proposal, when you're writing about the research you're going to do, make sure you're writing it in future verb tense. The way this class is, because it's, you know, we're trying to, it's not a graduate program. You're not, you know, proposing to do research that you will conduct next, you know, semester. You have to it kind of is overlapping. If I start cutting out, let me know. It says my internet's not stable. So what was I saying? So, so you need to talk about it in future verb tense. So like it is hypothesized that blah, 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 blah. You write your hypothesis. You're referring to everything as though it's going to be in the future, even though you guys are probably already starting your research, right? You're doing it in the present, but since this is a research proposal, we're gonna sort of pretend, I guess is the word for it, that you're proposing to do research that you're gonna do in the future. Okay, so use all future verb tense. You should have at least 3 paragraphs in an introduction section, at least when you are describing it. And something to think about here is when you are, you know, you find all your literature in the library and in your other resources, when you present it to support the research you want to do, talk about what you found in that literature that you found. You know, like what did they study? What was the outcome of their study? How did they study it? How is it related to your variable? Like if you are studying happiness and you find a research article that has to do with happiness and how they tested it, well, tell me what they tested it, how they tested it, and how is this applicable to your research? How is it similar, or how does it support? It doesn't have to be exactly the same research design as yours, right? They're not going to be, no study is going to be exactly alike usually, unless they're trying to be alike. But something about that study supports your study, right? Probably the happiness variable or something.
Professor, I have a quick question on this.
Yeah.
Since we're doing our experiment with our partners, can my partner and I use the same 3 peer-reviewed articles for this?
Yes, you can. I've had that.
Thank you.
I should have remembered. I get that question pretty regularly. Yes, you can. You can use the same articles. You can help each other find articles to write about. Yeah. But don't look at each other's paper so that you don't end up writing the same thing. Sometimes if you're reading what someone else wrote, you will end up writing the same thing accidentally. So be careful of that.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So did someone say something?
Yeah. So the this week homework, like I see there's a rough draft for this. Is that right? So what should we do for that?
For the research proposal,
Yes,
you're going to
like
write
the rough draft.
the rough draft is
Yes.
so you're going to include all the sections. You're going to write it as completely as you can. As you're going to have the or the title page, the abstract, the introduction section, the method section with all the, the participants, materials, and procedure. You're going to have a statistics section in your, well, I'll get to it here. I'll tell you, but you're going to have everything that go, and then the discussion section and your references section. The point of it is for me to look over a a paper that you've written the best you could and tell you what you did wrong. So when you go back, you won't have much to change, but you'll be able to do a final draft of the proposal.
So, if I understand this correctly, we're doing everything without data, is kind of
Right,
what it is.
right.
Okay, the whole paper without data, and thus no conclusion.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Okay.
So by the time you write the final paper, you won't have much to do. You won't have much left to do. This is the hardest part. This rough draft paper is the hardest part. This is the hard part. Once you get through.
Is there? I'm sorry. So I'm sorry for interrupt you, but is there any way that because we only have few days to do the rough draft, so the due date have to be this Sunday, right?
Yes, but you're not going to put in any data or anything like that in there.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
No data. Let me explain it a little more. So you know what to put in the introduction section, right? The literature review articles, and you talk about them and how it supports the research you want to do. Moving along, here's the part that might be confusing to you. So for the methods section in a research proposal, you're going to tell me about how many participants you hope to get for your research. You haven't collected any research or any data yet, right? You're going to tell me how many participants you are going to try and get for your research paper. You don't know yet. When you have a final research paper, the very last paper, you're going to change that to how many you ended up getting. So right now you'll say, we hope to obtain 20 participants for our research. We plan to get them from friends and family or on Facebook or wherever you think you're going to get them. So you're just kind of guessing or estimating, giving me a plan of how you're going to collect that data and from whom and how many, right? So you're giving me approximately how many. By the time you get to the final paper, it's not due until the last day of class. You'll have all the data by then. You'll have all the research participants. You'll know how many there were. You're going to change all the verbs to past tense, because in this paper, you're saying, we will do this, we plan to do this, right? When you change it to the final paper, you change the verbs. Now it's past tense. We collected 20 data from 20 people, right? And not we hope to collect data from 20 people, right? Okay. So here's something else you should have already too. You should know what tests you're going to use to get your to measure your dependent variable. So are you using a personality survey? Are you using maybe reaction time program on the computer? So what devices and surveys or measures are you using? Make sure you describe them here. Use future tense, that you plan to use such and such a survey. Maybe give examples of questions that are from that survey. use an app on a phone to get a heart rate, and so on. Describe it and explain it as much as you can and to the best of your ability here in the material section. In the procedure, really pay attention to using future verb tense, what procedures you plan on using to, or all the steps you plan on taking to conduct your research here. How you will distribute your survey, how long will your participants have maybe, who's going to be doing what, when, and where, right? Is it all online? Are you doing it in person? Just describe it. Tell me like a story. Write it in future verb tense. This will be changed to past tense. And if anything changed, if by the time you get to your final research paper, you change it all into past verb tense, and you might need to change any procedures that had to change. Because sometimes once you start your research, you find out that this step you plan to do won't actually work and you had to change something, right? So you would change it. You will explain that here in the procedures. So for research paper or research proposal paper, you will have a statistics section. Here, this will only be about like a sentence long. You are going to, if I've probably already told you what statistical test you'll be using for your research papers, right? In the email when you get your approval forms done, you're going to tell me that's the test you're going to use. You'll name what kinds of variables you'll be testing for that t-test. Tell me if they're categorical variables or continuous variables and what test you'll be using, right? This is very short. This statistics section, when you write your final research paper, turns into a results section. So you change the title from statistics to results. And then you will be writing a sentence that you find on the website. If you recall, I showed you in the toolbox. If you go to, I think it's, is it here? Yes. No. No, I was right the first time. Sometimes I forget. Where did I put it? Oh, here it is, reporting statistics, where it belongs. So when you write, in your final paper, and you turn that statistics section into a results section, you find a sentence from one of these papers, any one will probably do, that is related to the test that you used. So if you used a t-test, open up here, find a sentence that has to do with a t-test and copy it and put in your own variables. So if you are using an independent samples t-test, use this sentence and change out, if you had like, maybe for experimental group, name what you were testing instead of experimental group. Put in your own numbers, how many people there were, the means, the standard deviation, the degrees of freedom, which is that number there, the t statistic, the p-value, and so on. All right, so just switch it out for your own numbers and your own variables. Okay.
Wait, so you want us to copy that like word for word?
Mm-hmm.
Except put in like our own information?
Yep.
Okay.
Because the reason I do this is because this is the way you write it in proper APA format. That's how they tend to structure their sentences for APA format when they're writing a formal research paper. So there's no creativity really involved here. So, scientific people can be kind of boring sometimes. Okay.
Professor, I
Yeah.
have a question, please. So since we don't have any data for the rub trap right now, do we just leave those empty?
So like I was saying, the data, reporting all the data, you don't do that until the last paper. You don't
Okay,
put that in
so
the paper.
the whole statistic part, we don't do it until the very last paper.
For your paper this week, you only write what statistics you plan to use. So if you're
Okay.
going to use a t-test, you say you're going to use a t-test to test your whatever independent variable you have and whatever dependent variable you have. Name them, right? It's only
Yes.
going to be like a sentence long.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mhm. And you label it statistics. Right. Another thing you should be kind of aware of, and I forgot to mention this, when you're writing a formal research paper, typically we don't use pronouns. We don't say we will test this and that. You say you won't say we will use a t-test to test our dependent and independent variables. You say a t-test will be used to test the, so you skip the, don't put in pronouns, or don't say like our group or we will, things like that. Don't do that. And so for a proposal, research proposal, you might label a discussion section possible outcomes. I will take either. You can name it possible outcomes if you want. You can name it discussion section. That's fine. But here you will tell me what are some of the possible weaknesses that you had in your study. We'd like to know what they are. And most likely for most of you, that is you will not have enough people in your research, probably, right? Or maybe there was some kind of confounding variable that you couldn't, or you weren't able to control for some reason. And then tell me what some of the strengths were for your study. What was good about your study? That's what you will discuss here. And when it becomes a final research paper, the very last paper, after you've collected the data and reported it, talk about if your results came out how you expected them to. And refer back to what you talked about in the introduction section. You can say, yes, we found what so-and-so found in their research study, or we found similar results, or our results supported what they found. Or maybe you found something that disputes a research study that you talked about in your introduction section. You say, we found something else, something different, and we studied it this way. We did it different. That's what you talk about in the discussion.
Really quickly, just to clarify, the strengths and weaknesses aspect that you were talking about, that will we be doing that like hypothetically with the future tense in this paper, or just leave it out completely?
Well, you can put hypotheticals here. Yes, you can say,
Okay.
you know, and you kind of already know, especially now, is, you know, it's really difficult to find a lot of people right now.
Right.
That are, so yeah, you could mention that.
Okay.
But if there's something about your study that you think is a strength, you could lay it out there too. Also, some reminders about references section. Don't forget, on the toolbox page, there are a lot of things you can, or websites and things to use for using proper APA format. Utilize it. Make sure it's in alphabetical order. You are using hanging indents. I think there was only like 1 or 2 people that messed that part up on their last paper. Make sure this references section starts on a new page. Let's see. Yeah, you should have at least 3 peer-reviewed articles cited in there, because you use 3 peer-reviewed articles in your introduction section. But make sure that if you used more than 3, that you also put them in there too. So let's see. And here's just some examples of how you cite things. There's more info on APA format proper APA format right there. So use that. Also, I posted a quick video on chapter 8 for you guys on the lectures page if you hadn't seen it. And so we're already on chapter 9. This is a pretty quick chapter. There's only like 20 slides. Anybody have questions about that again? I'm all ears.
I had a question about where it said that we have to reference like established surveys or tests.
Uh-huh.
And
So
I was just wondering how to like format that, because my group has like an established test for reaction time.
Oh yeah. Purdue OWL actually will give will show you how to do that. So I think that's probably the most useful. I mean, there's several websites, APA format websites you can use here. Some people like others more than others. My favorite is the Purdue OWL. If you just look it up, you'll find how to cite your survey, or your survey that you're using.
Okay, and then also for the possible outcome section, should we have like in-text citations or no?
In that section, you may or may not. I mean, you would only use them if you need to. The most of the literature review is in the introduction section or literature review. Yeah, typically that's where I'm looking for them, is in the introduction section. Yeah. All right, so chapter 9, this is more, I think chapter 8 was also on conducting experiments. This is a continuation on that same topic. Here we're discussing several things that have to do with generalizing experiments, internal and external validity. And one thing that helps with that is your sampling, how you're doing sampling techniques. There's two different kinds, probability sampling and non-probability sampling. I think we talked about these a little bit before. Probability sampling is where, you know, each member of your specific population has the opportunity to be able to participate in your study through random sampling, whereas non-probability sampling is not. It's kind of, usually it's like non-probability sampling is like getting people from the internet, right? Sampling really affects external validity. And I can, so here's an example of, you might think that you would get a good variety of people, say if you were trying to obtain people from Facebook, for example. But really, you often end up, even when you're selecting people to fill out a survey through Facebook, you will often get people that are more like you, especially if you have a strong profile, which I learned when I was conducting research. I ended up with mostly white women with higher educational levels. And it wasn't even intentional. It's just because it seemed like, I'm assuming people are kind of attracted to like-minded people, or like people that are like them. They feel more comfortable and they could relate, right? And so if they had paid any attention to my profile, they might be more likely to answer a survey from someone like me, right? It was a little different collecting surveys back then in Facebook, but it did go through my own personal account, and I ended up getting people too much like me. I needed better diversity and I didn't get it. So you can see how people using the internet can maybe skew your sampling if you do it that way. So it's easier if you maybe, if your whole population are like Psych 100 students at all the universities in your area, and you randomly pick people out of several classes. That'd be a little better, right? It would be able to sort of generalize more to younger people, for example, in various areas, or a wider group of people. It still would only generalize to college students that are in a certain age group, if I did it that way, my example just a moment ago. So trying to generalize to a lot of different people from a lot of different places is not as easy as it sounds. So, but that is the goal, to do good research. Otherwise, your results will only apply to a certain group of people. All right, so just know that larger samples, larger numbers of people in your sample will help obtain more accurate estimates of the actual population values. In fact, if you had the entire population for the people you have under review, you wouldn't need statistics. Let that sink in. Statistics are because you only have access to a portion of the people that you're studying. Okay, so on to manipulating, or the manipulation of your independent variable. So manipulating the independent variable here, you must construct an operational definition of the variable. And in essence, when you're writing a method section, that is what you are doing. You are describing how you're going to measure something. That's what the materials section, right? If you use a survey or a computer program or some kind of physiological device, you're going to explain it there, right? And then you're also going to give the exact steps to how you did it, right? That's operationally defining your variables. And that's where you define both the independent and dependent variables. Also, setting the stage. When you are conducting research and you're asking people to come and participate, make sure that you supply your participants with enough information so that they are truly able to give an honest consent. I know that a lot of studies, you do try to hide a certain amount of information so they don't know quite what you're studying, but they do deserve to know what to expect, right? What's going to happen to them, what they're going to be doing. If you do have to hide something, make sure you tell them afterwards, you know, what it was all for and what was really going on. And there's also two different kinds of manipulations when you're manipulating the independent variable. And one is known as a straightforward manipulation. The other is known as a staged manipulation. And just like it sounds, a straightforward manipulation is just manipulating the variable as is with instructions and the stimulus presentations, right? It's just running a straightforward research study. But in a staged manipulation or event manipulation, here is where you're sort of rigging something to make it look real, but it's not. It's almost like putting on a show. Here you might have participants that are pretending to be participants, but they might actually be researchers. And they might walk in, you know, and say, and interact with the actual participants to get them to do a certain thing. They've done this, for example, when they wanted to see if how affected people would be to a group of people who have a certain point of view that was like maybe really off. Would they still agree even though it was not right? If they knew, for example, they had several Confederates, is what we call them, which are other participants or researchers pretending to be real participants. They had a group of Confederates gather in a room, and they had a researcher asking questions, and then they would have one participant come in and sit with the rest of them who was a real participant. But while they were asking all these questions, slowly but surely the questions got weirder, and the Confederates started just agreeing to certain things that just would be like, most people would say, no way, I wouldn't do that. And they wanted to see if the real research participant, because they felt the need to conform to what the rest of the group was saying, would they go along with it, or would they say, hey, no, and go against the crowd? And so that's sort of a good example of a staged manipulation. They found that most people, when put in that position, will go with the crowd, no matter how crazy it seems. Sad, but true. No one wants to stick out, I guess. Okay, so another thing to consider when you're manipulating the independent variable is how strong is a manipulation. Basically, in simple experimental designs, you just have two levels, two levels of one independent variable that you're comparing to each other. So a general principle to follow is to make the manipulation as strong as possible, especially if you are experimenting with something kind of new that you hasn't really been tested before, never been tested before. You want to make it as strong as possible to make sure you can detect a significant difference between the groups, right? It helps to make sure that you can find a difference if there is one, if one exists. So considerations for strength. One is external validity of the study. So this is sort of on the flip side. If the manipulation is too strong, though, you might actually create an unrealistic situation, something that's not really true to life. So it sort of renders your research useless. This is more apt to apply to studies done in a laboratory. And so it would make it hard to generalize to the real world. So this would affect generalization. Also, with ethics, it might not be ethically responsible to subject participants to extreme manipulations. For example, if you wanted to test spanking children, maybe you wouldn't be able to do that as far as, parents and children go, and punishment. Maybe you would sort of test different kind of punishment instead of actual spanking. That would be an ethics issue. Also, another thing to think about is the cost of manipulation. So usually in research, we don't have enough money for it's limited. So you might not be able to have expensive equipment, or be able to hire a bunch of Confederates, or have a long-term study that goes on forever. So oftentimes you have to keep it down to your budget level. So that's another thing to think about when you're manipulating an independent variable. Okay, so as far as measuring the dependent variable, things to think of are, there's three different kinds of, basically in social sciences, of how to measure a dependent variable. And one is a self-report, right? Those are usually, surveys and scales and such. And then there's behavioral, and then there's physiological. So when we did our Stroop test, we were testing a behavioral, because we were testing your reaction time, right, to reading words that were corresponding to the color of the word and the spelling of the word, right? So we were testing your behavior when we manipulated that. There's different kinds of self-reports, right? There's, people's attitudes, psychological characteristics, the list is endless. And there's lots of different kinds of behavioral measures too. But as far as physiological measures go, we test things like how much people are sweating. There's a galvanic skin response that we use to test for that. There's electromyograms, which test the electrical activity of nerves and muscles. There's an EEG, which is electroencephalogram. This tests the electrical activity in your brain. There's the MRIs. Probably many of you have probably maybe been in one of these where they slide you in that big cylinder and they take images of the inside of your body. And then there's an fMRI. This is where researchers scan parts of your brain while having you do some kind of task to see what part of your brain lights up, which is kind of cool. They do that a lot in behavioral sciences. Let's see, there's multiple measures. All of you are using or just testing one dependent variable, but more often than not, researchers actually test more than one dependent variable since they're added anyway, right? So they will actually include more than one in a study. And they will test it they will test each dependent variable in a variety of ways. So say they're testing for happiness, they might test this by observation as well as maybe through a survey, right? They might do it by interviewing their loved ones to see how happy that person is. So they'll test it in many different ways. All right, sensitivity to dependent variable. Actually, when you are testing for the dependent variable, it should be sensitive enough to detect differences between the groups, right? There should be a big enough difference between the groups so that you could pick it up, because there can be several issues related to measuring dependent variables, and two of them are called ceiling effects and floor effects. Ceiling effect is when your independent variable seems like it doesn't have any effect on the dependent variable because your participants quickly reach the maximum performance level on the measure. And basically, it's like giving students a test and they all get a perfect score. And that's because your exam wasn't hard enough and it failed to measure their true abilities. So it's giving like too easy a test to pick up any differences. Then the opposite of that is the floor effect. It's like giving a test to students, but they all fail on it on the exam. This is a case where your exam was way too hard. Hopefully mine aren't like that. Mine are somewhere in the middle, hopefully. All right, so there's different costs to measures. It's getting much more affordable to do survey research because they can be put online, but you can't just use any survey. If a lot of, believe it or not, a lot of scales and surveys are owned by certain people because professors will do their life's work and create surveys and sell the rights to use it to different researchers. So there's that. Some are free, some are not. It can cost to have people to pay people to come and observe or evaluate your participants, and equipment can be expensive. Also, here's some additional controls to consider when you're controlling for, extraneous things. So the use of a control group makes it possible to eliminate a lot of different alternative explanations. So instead of just getting a bunch of people, give them an experiment and then test them, it's good to have a control group, another group that hasn't had the experiment, so you can compare the two to make sure there really was an effect and it wasn't something else causing a change. And then there's something a gentleman by the name of Orn in 1962 came up with, which is called demand characteristics. And this is any feature of an experiment that might inform participants of the purpose of a study. And basically it's people will figure out what you're studying and they will try to sort of behave accordingly or behave the way they think you want them to behave. You can kind of avoid this by using measures that people aren't aware of. They don't know they're being measured in this way. Or if it's like a survey and you're asking a lot of different questions, say you have a survey that's asking people about their happiness levels. Well, if you don't want them to know that's what they're being studied on, you might throw in a bunch of questions in there that don't have to do with happiness. They're just sort of filler questions. You might ask them about, how outgoing they are, or, what they had for dinner the other day. It sort of throws them off. They don't quite know what you're looking for, right?
Professor, say those kind of questions, do we put it in the survey as well?
Well, sometimes people will create a group of filler questions that are asking, maybe you want to include another dependent variable. So you create questions that have to do with that and they can all work together. Yeah, you can, but you don't have to either. You can just throw them out.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you can be creative in research to a point. Actually, it is very creative in some ways. Also, controlling for participant expectations is another thing. We have placebo groups. This is in like the medical sciences, where people will, half of your clients will receive the actual drug and the other will get like a sugar pill to compare them. A lot of times people just getting a pill thinking they're getting medication can make them think it makes them feel better, when reality is it was just the pill. It's called the placebo effect. The thought of maybe getting better because you're getting medicated can actually cause you to become better. It's all sort of in the mind, right? So a lot of research will have a placebo group and a medication group, and then test the two to make sure that just because you're giving them a medication and testing to see if it made them better, was it the medication making them better, or was it just a placebo effect? And you can control that by actually having a placebo group, because then you can see if the medication group does do better than the placebo group. Then there, on the other hand, aside from participant expectations, there are also experimenter expectations. We have our own biases. Especially if you're the researcher and you're testing something, you have sort of a certain hope that certain things happen, and whether you're trying to or not, your hope can rub off on people, and it may not even be um, overt. It might be covert. That your body language, inflection of voice, stuff you're not even sure of is kind of taking place, and it signals people about like what you're hoping happens. And so this can rub off on your participants and skew your results. This was found in a study that was done that tested teacher expectancy. A student was placed in teacher's class, and they were told that that student was very intellectually gifted and that student would do well, even though he was an average student. But even though at the end of the study, the student actually did do well, because the teacher expected that student to do well and treated the student differently because of that. So it was sort of the experimenter bias, right? It's good to know if you plan to have kids in the future, right? Treat them like they're the brightest, little stinkers there are, and maybe they will follow suit, hopefully. Okay, so there's some other things you can do, and one is having a single blind experiment, and that's where just the participants are not aware of what group they're in, whether they're in like the drug group or the experimental group or the control group. And then there's a double blind experiment. I kind of did a double-blind experiment when I worked for the Motorcycle Safety Foundation. None of my evaluators that were testing people on their motorcycles knew whether the riders were in my experimental group or my control group. And so it made no difference to them how well they did on their tests, their on-bike tests. So a double-blind group is where not only does the participant not know what group they're in, but the one who is testing or the researcher doesn't know either. I knew, but I wasn't testing them. So, and you know, sometimes they try to get it out of me. It was too much. All right, so okay, so this last little bit I don't need to go through because I already did in the longer little where I went over how to write your research proposal. This here is so sort of an overview of how to write a research proposal and what is in each section, which I just went over with you. But this is more conforming to what your book says about it and may or may not be on the test. So you might want to review it just to be, you know, safe. So all of the rest of these slides have to do with what is in each of the, oh, well, at least that one was, I think. I wonder if the rest of it. Okay, well, I think this, let's see. Just this one was. All right. Okay, so let's go over what a pilot study. A pilot study is a trial run. If you are putting a lot of money into research, like the one I did for the Motorcycle Safety Foundation was millions of dollars for that study. Well, you're not just going to design the study and then go out there and start the study. You need to test your design and how it's going to operate before you officially put it into effect. So you can find out if your instructions make sense to the participants, for example, or do all the steps, are they possible to do those steps, or is there some kind of hitch that you didn't really think of that could happen? When we did our pilot study, we actually did find several hitches. We found it was hard to keep track of which participant was which when they went from like answering their surveys to the on-bike test, because we needed to be able to match their scores on the survey to their test scores on the on-bike test. And if we didn't keep track of which was which, we would be wasting our time, right? So we had to give them all numbers and put the number on the test to match them. So that was that saved us a big headache before we put the whole thing into action, right? It can be also a time where you find out that some of your questions on your surveys are confusing to people, or maybe the setting isn't quite right to get the results you need. There's all kinds of things you would find out in a pilot study. And then manipulation check is when shortly, not long after you start a study, after you've collected some of your data, you go ahead and test it a little early to see if you're going to see some significant results. Otherwise, you're wasting a lot of time and money. So it's kind of a manipulation check to see if it's working. And don't forget about debriefing. Debriefing is what you do when you tell your participants what they just did and why they just did it. You debrief them, tell them what the study was all about. It makes them feel better. Okay, so after analyzing and interpreting the results, let's see. Yeah, this is where I was just telling you about how it explains the last paper. So once you've written your final research paper and everything, usually you will present your findings to professional groups. When you're in graduate school, you are going to be presenting your thesis or your dissertation research to a panel. If you work as a professor doing your own research, you have meetings to show your research findings to your colleagues. If you work in business after you conduct, I don't know how many times I have, tested and evaluated different things at the social services agency. And then I had to run my analysis, write it all up, create a PowerPoint presentation, which is what you guys are going to do. And then I had to give it to the very top of the whole thing. I had to present it to them. So that is common. And especially in academia, they will take their findings and try to get it published in journal articles, which is what you guys use for your introduction sections typically. Nice dog, Bridget.
Thank you.
And I am, huh?
He wanted attention. He was sitting
Oh.
at my feet while I was like listening to the lecture.
He's cute, very cute. And that ends the lecture. Hey, I ended right on time this time. That was pretty good. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. I'll hang out if anyone has any more questions, but other than that, I am done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Professor.
I
Have a
actually
good one.
had a question.
Okay.
Where was the first slides from? Was it from weeks before, or like for the research proposal?
Oh.
That's not in this
You
week's
mean
slide.
this one here? So I found this in lectures, week 6. And this is review writing a research proposal. Also, there's even more instructions in the toolbox. If you go to the APA format papers, you're going to find this quick guide. And I think,
okay.
Yeah, that will have everything in there too.
Okay, perfect. I was just confused because it wasn't on this week's, and I was like, where is it? I didn't know if I was looking in the wrong place, but okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hi, can I have a question about the consent form, like the one that you told us to write to give to the participant? Like, do we need the participant to sign it and then give it to you?
I would probably have them sign it. If you are, I don't need to have them. I just wanted to see that you created one. I would just recommend having your participants sign one so that you don't get anyone angry with you. They know that, because people are pretty savvy to how research goes, and they know that's required.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Like, because my friends, like my teammate, like he don't know how to let them sign the form online.
Oh, well, you could use it. You could put it on to a forms. You know, you can create a Google form, and then just have them sign at the bottom. Or you could have them check mark it. Yeah, you could say, check this box to agree to this, you know. You could do it.
Oh, okay, I got it.
They're doing that now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. So I've just had this issue before on Canvas, so I just want to make sure. Do you leave feedback like through Canvas on assignments? Because sometimes it'll say view feedback, and I've had teachers leave feedback, but I can't access it. I was just curious because like on the extra credit survey that I turned in, like I didn't get the full amount of points, but when I click on the view feedback, I didn't see anything. So I was just wondering if there was any like note there that I should know about.
Let me look. I don't think I really did for extra credit.
Oh, okay.
I did do, let me see why that was.
Because like every time
it seemed right.
Access feedback, like I can never get it on my computer for some reason, so I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something important.
Worksheet, let me find it. Chapter Maybe it's this one. Where'd it go? Maybe it's here. Informed consent. Oh, here it is. Amanda. You're Amanda Drake, right?
Yes.
For the extra credit, it was 10 points.
Oh, I'm sorry. It said 20 in the information, so I thought I only got half and I did something wrong.
Oh, no, you didn't do anything wrong.
Okay. And then just another little section. I remember from the lecture you said that after exams you usually do provide like a small extra credit assignment like that one. Will there be one for exam 2?
No, it's just after exam 1. There's extra credit, and then I give a little bit more at the end of the semester.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. How about Amanda or Shelby? Are you guys there? One of you?
Yeah, I had a question about like my project specifically. So if Shelby wanted to like ask something first, so I don't like waste her time.
Oh, Shelby, are you there? Shelby, I don't think is there.
Okay. So my project is the one with the breakfast and the reaction time. And in your email, you said that we are gonna like we've already been doing this, but we asked the participants like if they usually eat breakfast or not. And then we give them like the opposite. So if like they usually do eat breakfast, they fast. So they're not like used to eating breakfast before the reaction time test, because that would be like a confounding variable.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, is that like random then? Because it's kind of like we're putting them into groups, but I guess they kind of don't know.
So, if they're not used to it, you don't have them, or you do have them fast. And those are the ones that you are testing?
Yeah, so basically we're testing, like, let's just say somebody, like I go to my mom, let's just say, and she like rarely eats breakfast. So I tell her, oh, eat some food before you take this reaction time test and then take your reaction time test. Like that's what you told us in our email.
Yeah. Interesting.
I
guess we'll have to do it this way. I'm trying to think. It kind of, I mean, because you're not really randomly selecting people that way, really.
Yeah.
Well, but you're still like, you are asking them whether or not they fasted on these questionnaires?
Yeah. In our survey, it says like one of the questions is, do you normally eat breakfast? And then it's like a yes or no kind of question. And then the next one is, did you eat breakfast this morning, like before your test? And then they say yes or no. And then they give us their results, their milliseconds of the reaction time test.
Oh, I see.
So that's how we set it up, because I feel like that was easy for the participants to understand.
It's almost self-selecting, kind of.
Yeah, I don't know how we could change that. I feel like it's like a little late because we already have like all of our participants.
Yeah, I think you'll have to keep doing it that way.
Okay, and then one more question. So the hypothesis is people who don't eat breakfast will have slower reaction times. So the control variable would be people who do eat breakfast, and then the experimental is the people who don't, correct?
Yes, actually.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure so I wasn't missing anything.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing because it's like the absence of something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But okay, I like, because I'm basically like done with my proposal. Well, not done. I'm still like obviously editing and whatever, but I'm like trying to just figure it out.
Yeah, you don't need your results yet, right?
Yeah. I didn't do anything with that.
Okay. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Amanda. All right. Are you there, Shelby? Okay, I'm going.